There are no frankly unsuccessful engines under the hood of the Opel Astra H. 1.4 Twinport Z14XEP 90 horsepower. The basic 1.4-liter naturally aspirated engine was installed on all European-built Astra Hs. This is a good and unpretentious engine with a timing chain drive, hydraulic compensators, twin-port flaps and an EGR valve. We will not dwell on it in detail, because there are few Astra Hs with it, but we have a detailed analysis of this engine. 1.6 Twinport Z16XEP 105 horsepower. Until the beginning of 2007, the Astra H was equipped with a 1.6 twin-port engine. This is the same 1.4, only with an increased displacement. 1.8 Z18XER A125 horsepower. The 1.8-liter engine before restyling also belongs to the old engines. It appeared back in 1998 and became a continuation of an even older engine. This is an extremely simple engine with a timing belt drive and variable intake manifold geometry. 2.0 Turbo Z20LET 170 horsepower Z20LET 200 horsepower. Sometimes on sale you can find pre-restyling and restyled Astra Hs with a 2-liter turbo engine. The history of this engine goes back to the 1990s to very durable and peppy engines with cast iron cylinder blocks. The 2.0 turbo is durable, fast, and inexpensive to repair, although it is currently unknown how much health is left in these engines. 2.2 Direct Z22YH 155 horsepower. On pre-restyling Astra Hs, a 2.2-liter direct injection naturally aspirated engine is very rarely found. 1.6 Z16XER A16XER 115 horsepower. 1.8 Z18XER A18XER 140 horsepower. Restyling of the Opel Astra H happened already in the 2007 model year, and in general there are more updated cars on the roads and for sale. The engine line after the restyling has become significantly younger. New aspirated engines 1.6 Z16XER A16XER and 1.8 Z18XER A18XER have appeared. Essentially, these are identical engines. By the way, the old 1.4 twin-port engine and the new 1.6 on Astra H station wagons are found with factory gas equipment. So, the 1.6 and 1.8 engines have a timing belt drive, they have 2 phase shifters, and there are no hydraulic compensators in the valve drive, but this does not particularly bother the owners if the engine runs only on gasoline. These engines, as well as the old 1.6 twin-port, have an expensive thermostat that costs $130 and lasts about 70,000 kilometers. The rubber seal falls off, after which the antifreeze circulates freely in a large circle. Instead, it is better to install a thermostat designed for a Chevrolet engine. It is not much cheaper, but it lasts much longer, due to a faulty inlying temperature sensor, which is located next to the thermostat. These engines will have difficulty starting in cold weather. The phase shifters of these motors caused trouble during the warranty period, but dealers solved these problems. With high mileage and saving on oil, the phase shifters were out. They rattle during morning starts. By the way, there is a hexagon screw in the cylinder block behind the generator. If you unscrew it, you gain access to the check valve in the oil channel to the cylinder head. If you change this valve, you can cure the morning rattling of the phase shifters. Do not ignore errors in the phase change system, cause. In addition to deteriorating engine traction, everything can end with oil squeezing out directly onto the timing belt with a high probability of it jumping. New phase shifters for these motors will cost $180. These engines also readily pass oil through the seals and valve cover. The oil in the spark plug wells finishes off the modular ignition coil even faster, which is already famous for its flimsy insulators. If an oil emulsion appears in the expansion tank, then you need to change the oil filter heat exchanger gaskets. Along with them, it is also worth changing the cap of the expansion tank. Install a new one, 13,502,353, from Astra J and Insignia. It lasts longer and reduces the risk of swelling of the cooling system tubes. Also keep an eye on the tube that supplies antifreeze to the throttle valve. If it becomes stiff, it will soon burst. A lot of antifreeze will leak through it. We have detailed reviews for both of these engines. There is more information there, including about the diaphragm valve in the valve cover and about the not always successful engine control units. 1.6 Turbo Z16LET 180 horsepower. The updated Astra H received a 1.6-liter turbo engine, which we also have a detailed review of. Cars with such an engine are bought by true fans of hot Opel. This engine is not bad and is based on a 1.6-liter naturally aspirated engine. Essentially, the weak points are the same. However, this engine was the first among Opel units to begin to destroy and melt pistons. For the Opel Astra H, 3 completely different turbo diesels were prepared. They were available throughout the entire production period of this model, but they were installed only at European Opel factories. We analyzed each of these engines in detail, so look for all the details on our channel and via the links in the description. All these engines are equipped with common rail systems, with electromagnetic injectors. The 1.3-liter uses a timing chain, while the others use timing belts. 1.3 CDTI Z13DTH 90 horsepower. The younger 1.3-liter turbo diesel is an Italian development. I was very pleased with this engine with its minimal fuel consumption and good reliability. 1.3 CDTI should not rattle the chain, smoke from the oil filler neck, and in general should pull vigorously and be dry on the outside. In general, you can safely buy a serviced Astra with this engine. 1.7 CDTI, Z17DTL 80 horsepower, Z17DTH 100 horsepower, Z17DTJ, A17DTJ 110 horsepower, Z17DTR, A17DTR 125 horsepower. The 1.7 CDTI engine is the brainchild of the Japanese company Isuzu. On the Astra, this engine is found with both the Bosch and Denso fuel systems, and this is also a cool engine, reliable and unpretentious. It has one feature related to the installation of injectors, which the owner should be aware of. 1.9 CDTI Z19DTJ 120, Z19DTH 150. The flagship 1.9 CDTI turbo diesel for the Astra H was created by Fiat. This is a very peppy engine. You can find its 120 horsepower version paired with a 6-speed automatically. Literally the only trouble with this motor is the swirl flaps. Everything else about it is good and made simply. Opel Astra H wore out the old 5-speed manual transmission F17. It is installed in tandem with almost all gasoline engines and one of the modifications of the 1.7 CDTI turbo diesel. If this transmission is mated to the base 1.4-liter naturally aspirated petrol engine, then there is nothing to worry about. But transmission oil should be updated every 40,000 kilometers, but other companion motors of this mechanics are capable of damaging its health. Literally everything wears out in it, even the differential and, most often, the front bearing of the secondary shaft. To extend its life, you need to spare no time and money on changing the oil and regularly checking the oil for chips. It is most convenient to insert a probe with a magnet at the end into the transmission housing through the hole in the unscrewed breather. If the F17 transmission hums while driving, and the magnet detects chips, then you will have to repair the transmission or look for a good used one. To change the oil, you need to remove the manual transmission pan, because it doesn't have a drain plug at all. Then the pan needs to be installed on a new gasket. There is a control and fill hole on the side of the transmission housing. By the way, there is a magnet on its plug, so you can navigate by the chips stuck to it. Oil can be poured through this hole, but it is most convenient to do this from above through the hole under the breather. Fill until oil flows through the side filler hole. By the way, some workshops offer replacing the F17 box with a D16 from Chevrolet. There is also the option of installing an F23 transmission, but the engine mounts will need to be altered. By the way, the 5-speed F23 is paired with a 1.7 CDTI turbo diesel with 100 horsepower. The 6-speed manual transmission of the M32 is also not absolutely reliable, it has weak points. But on the Astra H it lasts a long time before it starts to hum and wear out, especially if the owner pours more oil into it, that is, at a level above the control hole. You can also watch a detailed review of the M32 gearbox on our channel. Cars with a 6-speed gearbox are equipped with a dual-mass flywheel, which will also need to be replaced one day. Paired with the 1.3 CDTI engine is a 6-speed manual M20. This is a lightweight M32, which requires periodic filling with fresh oil, and its differential may not survive aggressive slipping. 2-pedal Opel Astra H with 1.4 and 1.6 petrol engines, as well as with a 1.3 CDTI diesel engine, are equipped with Easytronic robotic transmissions, also known as MTA. The design of the robots is simple. These are F17 and M20 transmissions, on which are mounted servos that change gears and control the clutch. To the weak points of these mechanical transmissions, problems with servos were added. But it is not all that bad. Practice shows that robots take about 250,000 kilometers to repair. In fact, they are very simple. There is a motor and 2 gear selection servos, and another motor in the automatic clutch. Yes, with high mileage, motor commutator brushes will need to be replaced, but you can literally change them in the field. The motor shaft bearing in the clutch drive may wear out, and the clutch master cylinder may also wear out. But all this can be changed simply and inexpensively. There are already many workshops on Easytronic robots. Robot clutch discs last a long time, but you must engage neutral if the car is stopped at a traffic light for more than 20 seconds. Otherwise, the released bearing will wear out at an accelerated rate. If the clutch is in good condition in drive, the car with Easytronic immediately begins to move slowly. Also, the fluid in the clutch servo needs to be changed every 20,000 to 30,000 kilometers. It is regular brake fluid. But to replace it, you need a proprietary scanner, which can also be used to adapt the clutch. There are shocks during braking and sharp pressing of the gas. Yes, Easytronic is very leisurely, like a driving school graduate, and because of it the car can roll back when starting downhill, but you can live with it. Only Astras with 1.6 and 1.8 liter petrol engines and a 1.9 CDTI diesel engine got real automatic transmissions. But these are different transmissions, although both are created by Aisin. In the first case, it is a 4-speed AF17, also known as Aisin 6041SN. We have a detailed review of this long-lasting transmission. When changing the oil every 60,000 kilometers, with non-aggressive driving, even with an individual oil cooler installed, it lasts more than 300,000 kilometers. If normal maintenance is neglected, this automatic can stall after a mileage of up to 200,000 kilometers. But this transmission is simple and inexpensive to repair. In general, it will not empty your wallet. With an Italian turbo diesel of 120 horsepower. Under the hood of the Astra H is a 6-speed Aisin TF-80SC, also known as AF40. This is a much more modern and nimble transmission that has no reliability problems. Serious breakdowns of this machine occurred due to antifreeze getting into the ATF through a flimsy radiator built into the main one. The problem existed until 2007. In general, cooling the ATF in a separate radiator will benefit this transmission. What else should you pay attention to under the hood? If the instrument panel reports that the battery has lost charging, then the problem is probably a broken contact on the relay regulator. This contact can be soldered, but you will have to remove the generator. Over time, voltage drops may appear in the Astra H electrical system, while the negative terminal on the battery will heat up, but the generator will be fully operational. All this suggests that the contact to ground has become worse and its resistance has increased. As the ending of this story, the car will not start, because the voltage to start the starter or even run the fuel pump will be too low. Due to a bad ground, the fuel pump may turn off at idle. Due to poor ground, electrical systems do not work well. For example, the central locking will respond to the remote control every once in a while. The simplest solution to this problem is to add an additional ground wire, as well as cleaning or replacing the tips of all negative wires. Also keep the wire harness to the ECU clean and tidy. Sometimes wires break there, which leads to completely unpredictable glitches. The Opel Astra H chassis is extremely simple. There are McPherson struts at the front and a regular beam at the rear. There are no other options. The suspension is very durable. Everything lasts more than 150,000 kilometers. Both front control arm bushings are sold separately. The ball joint is fixed with screws, can be changed and sold separately. The original ball will cost $100, silent blocks $15, front, and $25, rear. A good non-original one is 4 to 5 times cheaper. The front stabilizer bushings are replaced separately. The original stabilizer links cost $50. Non-original products are much cheaper. With high mileage, it becomes necessary to replace 6 silent blocks of the front subframe. The original set will cost $100. The procedure is quite long, but necessary. The front wheel bearings are rather weak and began to hum at 150,000 kilometers or even earlier. They quickly fail if the car is wearing wheels with a diameter of 17 inches or more, and even drives through potholes. On standard 15 to 16-inch high-profile tires, the bearings last longer. The bearing comes assembled with the hub, and an ABS sensor is built into it. The original costs $160. The non-original is half the price. On the Astra H with petrol turbo engines and with the 2.2 direct injection engine, electronically controlled shock absorbers of the IDS Plus system are found. These are expensive and troublesome shock absorbers. Front and rear ones cost $250. Conventional passive shock absorbers according to the original cost $60 to $70. When inspecting a car on a lift, pay attention to the engine mounts, especially the rear one. In addition to a broken damper, you can also find a cracked mount. The screens along the Astra H muffler readily fall off. Secure them with screws or buy new screens. Also pay attention to the anthers of the handbrake cables. They are wiped, dirt and moisture get into them. In winter, it may happen that after lowering the handbrake lever, the pads continue to block the rear wheels. The Opel Astra H has an interesting situation with the steering rack. The rack is hydraulic, but its pump is not driven by a belt from the crankshaft, but is powered by an electric motor. The electric motor is located directly under the hydraulic fluid reservoir. This entire structure is installed in front of the engine shield on the passenger side. The steering rack suppliers for the Astra H were ZF and TRW. Most cars have a TRW steering rack. It can be recognized by its pot-bellied tank with a wide lid. If the car has a ZF steering rack, then the tank is tall and almost white, looks like a liter can of oil. The cap is small in width. This TRW steering rack appeared on the Astra G. There is only one option for steering rods and ends. The rods do not fit the ZF steering rack. For the ZF steering rack there are three options for steering rods, which differ slightly in length. There are tie rods for the standard suspension with 16-inch wheels and two options for the sports version of the chassis with 17-inch wheels and with 18 and 19-inch wheels. These are the troubles. Both steering rack options are the same in terms of reliability and maintainability. Yes, they can leak, but there are non-original repair kits with all seals on sale. But if driving over bumps leads to wear of the gear rack itself, or if the hydraulic distributor spool rubs grooves in the housing, then you will have to look for a used steering rack. Hydraulic pumps with electric motors are quite reliable, but at high mileage they begin to act up, overheat and shut down before cooling down. Such pumps will have to be replaced as an assembly with the tank. You can install used parts. The body of the Astra H is well made. This car not only has a high passive safety rating, but also has virtually no corrosion problems. This Opel does not rot even after dozens of salty winters. However, the paint layer is thin. It chips quite easily from pebbles and bursts under the moldings. Unfortunately, corrosion appears and undermines the paint on the sills and wheel arches. The edge of the trunk lid may bloom, and saffron milk caps appear on the body around the windshield. Russian-assembled cars readily turn red along the lower edges of the doors. They also wear off the paint on the door handles. We recommend draining the water from the cavities in the thresholds 1 to 2 times a year by removing the rubber plugs in their holes. Cloudy and stone-cut headlight glasses indicate the significant highway mileage of this car. On many cars, the rubber lip under the bumper hangs crookedly or has already been torn off, which indicates contact with curbs, snow drifts, and off-road forays. If the front bumper breaks off its fastenings at least once, then it is almost impossible to return it back with even gaps along the wings. But there is a solution: just buy and install new plastic mounts. It costs $12. Let's also remember about the broken glass of fog lights. In the original, their lampshades are made of tempered glass, but large stones can still break them. A small crack can grow if water or snow gets on the hot glass. Corrosion can also damage the fog light reflectors if water gets into the housing. Original fog lights cost $130. There are many replacements on sale and even separate glasses for $15. Also pay attention to the roof of any version of the Astra H. It is possible that there on the black moldings you will see holes uncovered with plugs for the trunk rails. Unfortunately, due to age, the fastenings of the plugs fall apart. A stream of water during washing washes away the plugs. They are sold for $25, $13,125,719 and $13,125,723, together with the lower fittings. A non-original set of 4 plugs with fasteners is half the price. Sometimes the side mirrors and the windows themselves fall off on Astras. They simply peel off from the plastic fastening and fall onto the asphalt. To prevent this from happening, it is probably better to simply re-glue them. Although the glass may have been re-glued by the previous owner, over time the front doors on Astras sag, as evidenced by an extraneous knock when slamming and the protruding bottom edge of the doors when closed. If the door is not yet loose on the hinges, then you can adjust the lockmate striker, and it is better to buy new strikers along with their screws. If the front doors are loose in the hinges, then you will have to work hard. Backlash appears due to wear of the cotter pins and their holes in the hinges themselves. The difficulty is that the hinges are welded to the body. To replace, you will have to carefully cut them off and weld new hinges. Or make bushings for old hinges and new cotter pins. If after rain or after washing you find wet front mats and moisture on the front sills, then remove the front door trim and restore the seal around the speaker. It is from there that water flows, which flows down through the doors to the drainage holes. Let us add that the trunk door lock button is not very reliably protected from moisture. Not only water can get under its rubber cap during washing, but also during rain. This threatens to break the button, and in winter it simply freezes. Craftsmen remove the button and place its rubber casing on the sealant. On literally all Opel Astra H's that often carry passengers, the rear door wiring harness breaks. It breaks in the corrugation in the doorway and sometimes very close to the electrical connector. A good auto electrician will qualitatively restore broken wires. Many Astra H's have gone through the sim repair process. Both steering column switches protrude from this module. It also has a cable through which the steering wheel keys, including the horn, are connected. This module from the factory has an unsuccessful 6-pin contact group. Over time, the contact in it simply disappears. Usually due to oxidation of the pins, less often due to cracks in the solder between the pins and the electronic board. There are also rare cases of breakage of a flexible cable. If the SIM module malfunctions, then all the buttons on the steering wheel work only once or are turned off completely. Well, repairing this module is not difficult, and in most cases you can only get by with a soldering iron. Another nasty problem with the Astra H is a breakdown of the recirculation damper shaft of the ventilation system. When the shaft breaks off, switching to air intake from outside or from the passenger compartment stops. If the shaft is broken, then switching recirculation modes is accompanied by a crunching noise that can be heard behind the glove compartment. On many cars, the damper and its shaft were replaced under warranty. A new damper costs about $100. But in principle, through creative repairs, it is possible to restore the broken shaft and firmly attach it to the damper. In general, the shaft breaks off due to an overly powerful servo drive. Therefore, craftsmen came up with a voltage limiter. It is connected as an adapter between the servo drive and its wiring. Another feature of Opel electronics is that for programmatic access to electronic units for their firmware and programming, as well as for binding new keys, you need a 4-digit password, car pass. In general, it is pinned to the service book. But if the code is lost, you can find it out from the dealer using the VIN, or you can contact Opel electronics engineers who will find the code using a programmer or even through the diagnostic connector. But there are cases when the ECU on a car was changed. They linked it to this car, but did not reset the information about the donor car and its car pass. This problem is discovered when binding a new, additional key. In this case, the original car pass will have to be removed directly from the immobilizer, but not every Opel and key making specialist will be able to perform such an operation. In this case, an Opel dealer can also help, providing car pass by VIN.